Hey everyone, it is Ujjwal. Today, we're going to talk about how you can craft the perfect personal statement to convey your narrative in your med school applications. Let's get started. Hey everyone, it is Ujjwal here. It is so great to see you. I hope you are all doing well and staying safe. Today, we're going to talk about how you can create the perfect personal statement that'll help convey your narrative in an effective, succinct, and concise manner. First, I would like to apologize for the long break from my previous videos. I was actually wrapping up my final semester of undergrad, so it's been a wild journey, but I'm finally back, and I plan on releasing at least one video every week, so definitely keep an eye out for those. I know that the AMCAS and ACOMAS applications have opened up recently. I believe it was last week. And that means it is time to get your personal statements, work and activity sections, and everything together. So in this video, we're going to talk about how you can approach the personal statement. When I was writing mine, I realized that there aren't that many resources out there to help guide us in writing the personal statement. And it's quite difficult to actually create a narrative that we are happy with in the first couple of attempts. So I wanted to create this video to serve as a guide for you guys out there in crafting your narrative in the perfect personal statement. As usual, this video will be divided into 3 sections. In the first section, we will talk about what the personal statement actually is. What is the goal of the personal statement and how we can use that to help structure our essay. Next, we'll jump right into the actual nitty-gritty details. What are some important things to keep in mind, and how we can go ahead and break down our personal statement paragraph by paragraph. And I will provide you with a framework to do so. The last section will be talking about some of the commonly asked questions with regards to the personal statement and some key things you should keep in mind as you edit your personal statement and finally bring your essay to completion. All right, so let's jump right into it. So the personal statement asks a very broad and general question. Why medicine? Why do you want to be a physician? If we think about it, this is a very simple question. It's something that we should have had the answer to way before we actually decided on applying to med school. But the fact is, there are so many different angles and approaches that you can take to answering this question that make this experience very overwhelming. Therefore, it's really important for us to break down the general question into something that's a lot more simple for us to comprehend. What is the goal of the personal statement? What does this opportunity provide us? The personal statement is your way of communicating directly with the admissions committee members. If you think about it, there are not many other opportunities for you to do so in your application itself before your interview. In your application, you're going to be primarily filling it up with objective measures of who you are, whether that be your MCAT and GPA or your coursework. So, the work and activity section and personal statement are the only 2 places you have to actually put in your own words who you are and essentially convey to the admissions committee members what you want them to know about you as a person. So the personal statement provides you with the opportunity to set yourself apart from your other peers and other applicants who may be better on paper in terms of their stats and numbers, but may not have as effective or compelling of a narrative as to why they want to go into medicine. If you can craft a very effective personal statement, it'll help you stand apart from the other applicants and hopefully get you the interview. So without further ado, let's jump right into the actual strategy on how we should tackle the personal statement. If there is one thing that you take away from this video, that is show, don't tell. The personal statement should be showing the reader what you want them to know about you as opposed to telling them directly. Think about it. If I were to tell you that I have leadership skills, would you be convinced? So you need to go ahead and use a narrative to back up and convince your claim as to why you demonstrate leadership skills. So that means using an actual example of a time you exhibited leadership qualities, whether that be through an organization that you were a leader in on campus or an initiative that you started in a third world country. Any of these kinds of examples would go ahead and effectively convey to the reader how you exhibit leadership skills. So it's very important to show your narrative and not tell it to the reader. That'll also help you have more experiences that you can talk about in the interview if questions about your personal statement come up. All right, so we need to show and not tell the admissions committee members about who we are. Now, how do we actually go about writing the personal statement paragraph by paragraph? This is something that not many resources out there provide, and so I wanted to kind of provide a quick framework on how you can do so. First things first, we have the introduction paragraph. If you think about it, when you're reading a book, if the first chapter or so does not really captivate your interest, or if you're watching a new series, if the first episode doesn't really capture your interest, the likelihood that you're going to be watching the entire series goes down significantly. So that means that it's very important for your introduction paragraph to captivate your reader. Now, I know that we're not writing a mystery novel here, so it's not going to be that easy to captivate the reader, and so you may be wondering how you should be doing so. My personal recommendation is to start off with the personal narrative. Start off at the one singular point or experience that helped really guide your interest in medicine. Think of the personal statement like a roadmap, and you want to always start off in the beginning and take the reader to your destination, which is why you want to be a physician. If you can start your narrative with a personal experience that means a lot to you, then you can definitely convey it in an effective manner to your reader. All right, so that's how you approach the introduction paragraph, and it is very important to make sure that it is compelling to captivate the reader's interest. How do you tackle the body paragraphs? I have a very systematic framework for doing so, and I highly encourage people to, one, adapt this framework as you see fit. So that means changing things that may not work well for your essay, because this is not a finalized framework. This is something that helped guide my thinking, and I definitely did deviate from this from paragraph to paragraph, so definitely keep that in mind as you approach your own personal statements. My framework was the following. 1. Pick one characteristic that I felt was very important that I wanted to convey to the admissions committee members. Once I picked that characteristic, I thought about different experiences and examples of times where I exhibited this characteristic that can help effectively show and not tell the admissions committee about what I want them to know about me. Once I narrowed down a couple of different instances, I went ahead and identified the most impactful experience that I could talk about. So at this point, I've identified one characteristic to convey about myself and a narrative that helps convey it. Now I need to put this all together. My first sentence of the body paragraphs usually started off with a in-the-moment experience. So that would be perhaps me doing something in the activity that I was talking about. And then after that first sentence, I would transition to talking about my role and my position in that activity. So for example, let's say I was working in a scribe and I wanted to talk about an experience I had in terms of teamwork, working with the entire team of physicians and nurses and the staff, and helping provide quality healthcare to patients. My first sentence could be talking about a particularly hectic day where we all had to come together as a team to help out a lot of patients. My second sentence would talk about how I am a scribe and what my role entailed on the medical team and how it fit in with the rest of the team. My second sentence would be what my role is on the team as a medical scribe and what my duties were and my responsibilities. After I was done with that sentence, the next thing would start jumping into the narrative once again, picking up where I left off from the first sentence. But here, I answered a couple of key questions. First things first, I needed to talk about that specific example and that specific narrative that I was honing on to demonstrate that characteristic of myself. Next, I made sure that I spoke about what I actively did in that situation. Remember, this paragraph is about you. You are telling the reader about something you did, and so it needs to be in active form. You need to talk about what you actively did on the team, and that should be demonstrating the characteristic that you want the reader to know. After you're done talking about that, you want to go ahead and transition to the end of the paragraph. Near the end, you want to make a quick connection to how the characteristic that you described and demonstrated is going to serve you as a healthcare professional in the future. By making that connection to how this characteristic will help you be a better physician, you are now tying in this characteristic to your future practice, and that is going to be very important to help drive the points home. So, in essence, your body paragraphs are going to be talking about a narrative about you exhibiting a specific characteristic, and then right at the end, you're going to tie this back to how this is going to make you a better doctor in the future. And by doing so, in however many body paragraphs you have, you will be succinct, concise, and to the point. And that's exactly what you want in your personal statement. All right, so that's what you do for the body paragraphs. Answer some key questions and organize your thoughts accordingly. What do you do in the conclusion? Well, the conclusion is very similar to the intro in that it needs to be concise, to the point, and it also has to be very effective and memorable for your reader. Because think about it. The conclusion is what the reader will be reading last, and so that is what they will most likely be remembering about you as they discuss with the other admissions committee members as to whether you should actually be offered an interview or an acceptance. For the conclusion, what I like to recommend is tying everything together. So that's normally what you would do in a conclusion. But remember when I said show, don't tell? Well, in the conclusion, you will now explicitly talk about the characteristics that you described. You're going to quickly summarize the characteristics that you described and talked about in the previous body paragraphs and how those will help you be a better physician overall and a better medical student. The last thing that I recommend is to make a connection with your narrative from your intro paragraph. This helps tie the entire essay together because it goes back to the initial experience that helped spark that interest in you as to why you wanted to be a physician. By making the connection back to the first paragraph, you're tying your whole point together and making your case more compelling. And that is it for your personal statement. By using these tips and tricks to organize and structure your essay, you will be able to effectively convey certain characteristics about who you are that you want the admissions committee members to know, and you will also be succinct and to the point. All right, so now let's jump into the final section, talking about some key things to keep in mind as you edit your personal statement and bring it to the final form, and some frequently asked questions that I commonly get about the personal statement. Let's go. So the first thing that I would like people to keep in mind is that when you're editing your personal statement, always ask yourself this question. After you read a paragraph, ask yourself, if you were the reader, someone who knew nothing about you, and you were going through that paragraph, did you learn something new about this person? If you did not, and if that paragraph is generic and anyone else could put their name on it, then that means that that paragraph is not effective, it doesn't get to the point, and it could most likely be thrown out and needs to be rewritten. A lot of students make the mistake of writing paragraphs that can come off a little too generic and that aren't that personal or specific to who they are. And that's common, and that's something that I did myself as well. But by going through and asking yourself if that paragraph conveys anything about you specifically, you will be able to double check and make sure that you're not going to have any paragraphs in there that aren't specific to who you are. All right, so that's the first thing you should keep in mind. The second thing that I always recommend students do is get one trustworthy individual to read your essays. The reason why I say only choose one and not send this to a myriad of people is because different people have different opinions. And if you get 10 different people to read your essays and you get 10 different pieces of advice, a lot of those may conflict and may not help you come to a final personal statement that you're happy with. By picking one person who you can trust, so that could be someone from the writing center in your undergraduate campus, perhaps it's a friend who is in med school and someone who's actually gone through the process, or maybe even a physician mentor. And maybe you have another individual who is very good with writing, and that is what they do. Whoever it is, pick one person and ask them to edit your personal statement from beginning to end and go through all of your revisions with that individual. That'll help make sure that you're being really consistent with your essay, and the advice you're going to get will also be really consistent and constructive and build on top of each other, as opposed to being really varied and random. All right, so that's the second piece of advice you should keep in mind. The third thing is, given that you should only have one person read your essay for edits, when you're done and you believe you're coming to a final form, I recommend now allowing other people to read it. People who perhaps do not have experience with medical school admissions. The reason why is because now you can ask for coherence and see what their initial impressions are. Because remember, the admissions committee members do not know anything about you, and they will be reading your application from a new lens. By asking others around you, perhaps who do not know you as well, or who aren't that well versed with medical school admissions, you will be able to get good generalized feedback as to how your intro or conclusions are, and you can also ask them after they read it what their key takeaways are and what they understood from the essay. If their answers are what you wanted the admissions committee members to know, then you know that your essay is coherent and to the point. If not, then you know that you should be tweaking some of your main points and perhaps conveying them a little bit more effectively or clearly. All right, so those are the three things that I want you to keep in mind as you're going through your personal statement. Now let's go ahead and answer a few frequently asked questions. The first question is, how many paragraphs should my personal statement actually have? And the answer is, there is no specific number. It doesn't matter if it has 4 or 5 or 6. The point is you structure everything by answering the main key questions that I said you should hit in the second section of this video. So there is no specific number of paragraphs. Another common question that people ask is when we're talking about our experiences, perhaps in a medical setting or clinical setting, can we use patients' real names or people's real names? Now, obviously, due to HIPAA, we should not be using real patient names or any personal identifying details, but you can use a quote-unquote fake name to make your narrative more personal. By using specific names to talk about how you connected with people, it can make your story more compelling and more personal. Therefore, I do recommend using fake names in place of the patient's actual names to go ahead and convey your narrative. The third question I tend to get is it okay to repeat information from your personal statement and the work and activity section? So the answer is yes and no. Yes, in that you can use the same experience in both places. No, because you should not be talking about that experience from the same angle in both places. Usually the work and activity section is going to be a little bit more generalized and talking about the activity as a whole. But in your personal statement, you want to take a very specific approach. You want to narrow in on a specific interaction, a specific experience in that activity, and that's what's going to help make your narrative more compelling, as we talked about earlier. So the answer is essentially yes and no. Just make sure you're talking about the activity from different angles in both places. The last question is usually, is it okay to include non-medical activities or experiences in the personal statement? And the answer is absolutely. You want to be as different and unique and setting yourself apart from others as much as possible. And by including non-medical activities, you should be able to do so. Also, keep in mind, one of the last things in the body paragraphs that I recommend you doing, tying in how that quality or characteristic that you just now demonstrated through your experience helps you be a better healthcare provider in the future. So you're already making that connection to medicine through that. So if your activity is non-medically related, that is completely fine and actually encouraged as long as you're portraying your narrative in a very concise and effective manner. All right, so that is it for this video, guys. I hope that was helpful. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please leave them down below and I will get back to you as soon as possible. As always, if you like the video, please like and subscribe, and I will see you guys in that next one. Take care.